all of life is governed by the laws of unintended consequences, and that certainly applies to politics. Democrats are so ravenous to get Donald Trump on literally anything that they'll go after their best friend and funder, Jeffrey Epstein, in order to try and do it. The problem is the evidence just ain't there, as we learned this morning, as they ran with headlines like this: Trump mentioned multiple times in Epstein's private emails. What do they got? Oh, they got an email saying that Trump was with one of the girls, a victim at Epstein's house. Oh, it's so salacious. It's so bad. It's the end. Look at this. This is the email itself. Donald Trump is with a victim for hours at my house. Oh my goodness. What happens next? Well, what happens next is we learned that the victim, who was redacted, was Virginia Roberts, who has on dozens of occasions in sworn testimony on national TV, in her book, in depositions, said that nothing bad ever happened with Donald Trump. Trump never acted inappropriately towards her at all. No sex and no flirting even. We know that Virginia Roberts was employed by Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Part of the reason why Trump banned Jeffrey Epstein was that he stole Virginia Roberts from Mar-a-Lago. This is established history. Donald Trump has talked about it. The unredacted version shows that it was Virginia Roberts who testified multiple times that President Trump did absolutely nothing wrong. Very strange. Bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for you. Will it pay off? This Democrat obsession with Jeffrey Epstein. And trust me, I'm a major advocate of just releasing literally all of the Epstein files. I want them all out. But if that were to happen, then both sides might learn some uncomfortable truths. And what's being established right now is that Jeffrey Epstein was, in fact, an agent of Israel, a foreign agent that was able to get to the highest possible rungs, nobody doubts that, of American society, American billionaires like Bill Gates, American presidents like Bill Clinton, flying around on his plane. What would we learn about our ruling class? What would we learn about how susceptible we are and how blackmailed our nation is by other nations? And this how much did we turn a blind eye to child predation in order to get more intel or protect our ruling class? That is a great question, and it's something that's being answered by The Drop site. This is a news website that has published a series of bombshell stories about how Israeli spies stayed for weeks at Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan apartment, how Epstein helped broker security deals with foreign nations, multiple foreign nations, big nations like Russia, Mongolia. I know people that do this for the Trump administration. These are people who are private citizens that often act on behalf of a state in order to get a negotiation done. They are agents of the state. That's the only way that these kind of things happen, by the way. This kind of stuff doesn't happen because someone, just out of the goodness of their heart, they just go and, I don't know, negotiate a big arms deal with Russia or Syria in the middle of a civil war, Mongolia. That's not how this all works. The last known photograph of Jeffrey Epstein actually has him wearing an IDF sweatshirt. How much more on the nose do you have to be? Now, this obviously brings us to something very interesting that's happening right now when it comes to the legacy of Charlie Kirk in Israel. As has been made public, Charlie Kirk was getting a lot of pushback from Jewish donors about having Tucker Carlson on stage. A principle I knew and worked with Charlie Kirk very closely. A principle that I know, as a matter of fact, Charlie adhered to. He wanted open debate. He wanted to be able to bring as many sides together as possible for us to unite and for us to be able to defeat the Marxist left, which is the ultimate enemy. And of course, Charlie wasn't going to kick Tucker off the stage. In fact, according to this new video that Megyn Kelly has released, Charlie Kirk was encouraging Tucker Carlson to go all the way against Jeffrey Epstein and his connections to the state of Israel. The truth shall set you free. Watch this.
Epstein clearly had contact with Israeli intelligence and American intelligence and French intelligence, but the only one you're not allowed to talk about is Israeli intelligence. But it seemed true to me And I had done some work on that. I knew a bunch of people pretty close to that story. So I thought that. And I said that to Charlie. And I said, but I'm not going to say that because I don't want to make your donors mad. I know it's just going to be like an endless flurry of text telling you to stop or you're going to lose a bunch of funding. And he looked at me, I'll never forget it, and said, go all the way. Do it. Go all the way. I said, man, a lot of things I can talk about. I don't need to talk about that. And he said, do it. So I did it.
And here's the thing, Stu. I was recently going through some old pictures to find one of me and Charlie that I knew we took at that event. And not only did I find pictures of me and Charlie, but I found a video of me, Tucker, and Charlie speaking backstage right before Tucker went out. Tucker and I were talking. Charlie came over and interrupted for just a second. And you can hear him on this tape, which I've listened to many times. It's very clear on my phone, less clear here probably as we play it. But he says to Tucker, go Max. He interrupts the conversation because he has to say to Tucker something. And what was so important to him to tell Tucker was, go Max. Here it is.
Go Max. Come on. Okay.
It's quick. It just happens to be on tape. And it backs up what Tucker said. And so I just think we need to be realistic. Charlie understood what was happening to the conservative movement over Israel. He probably understood it better than any of us because he absolutely loved Israel. And yet he represented and was of young people. He was young. That was his constituency. That's where he spent all of his time. And he knew that even on the right side of the aisle, they had turned and were turning on Israel. And knowing all of that, he told Tucker to go out there and do all the things Tucker did. Go Max, he said. Now, why did he do that? Because he knew there was a faction within the conservative movement that needed a voice. They needed somebody to put their thoughts and their complaints and their objections into words in a public setting and not just cede the whole argument to the other side, which has been dominating conservative thought and media forever, the Mark Levins of the world. And so it's one of the many reasons why I really object to this attempt to otherize, snuff out the voice of Tucker Carlson. Charlie knew exactly where Tucker stood on these issues and wanted him, and I quote, to go Max. The answer to what is happening right now on the conservative half of the aisle is not to silence Tucker, to diminish him to the point where he doesn't have followers. Not that that's possible, you lunatics, or to try to delegitimize Tucker. If anything, Tucker is a remaining voice for Charlie, whose views were changing himself. So I have nothing against Ben saying all the things he feels, or more neo-Connie people feeling that, or pro-Israel people saying all. I think they should say that, and I understand perfectly where they're coming from. But there is another reasoned, passionate point of view, and Tucker represents that. And that's what he's been doing on his show. It rubbed some people the wrong way, but it didn't rub Charlie the wrong way. In fact, he wanted more of it.
Well, Tucker Carlson went out on stage and did exactly that. Tucker Carlson says Epstein was working on behalf of Israel and committing crimes on American soil. Why was this allowed? Well, it has to be allowed if the individual, Jeffrey Epstein, had protection from the intel agencies and law enforcement agencies here in America. And that has been well established, demonstrably established. It's wild. Tucker's obviously covered this extensively. Before Epstein is sentenced, he flees the country. He goes to Israel. While he's in Israel, he tells people that he's thinking he just might stay there because they don't extradite Jewish criminals and pederasts. That is a matter of fact, by the way. So, ladies and gentlemen, was Jeffrey Epstein an Israeli spy? I mean, you have to simply assume yes. And I can tell you, I'm not going to show anybody. It's very in fashion right now to show a bunch of private messages from Charlie Kirk. I'm not going to do that. But on my phone, some of the final messages, because I spoke at this conference from Charlie Kirk, some of the final messages to me is you need to go hard on Jeffrey Epstein. You talk about Jeffrey Epstein. And I did. I called for the release, as I do now, of all available information. What on earth could we possibly be hiding? And the answer to that question is everything. Ladies and gentlemen, here's what Tucker said at the time on stage at Turning Point at Charlie's request, because Jeffrey Epstein was an Israeli spy and probably working for our CIA and probably working for other nation states. But at the very least, that's why he has so much protection, and that's probably why he's being protected right now.
Not acceptable. And I think the real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of intel services, probably not American. And we have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? How does a guy go from being a math teacher at the Dalton School in the late 70s with no college degree to having multiple airplanes, a private island, and the largest residential house in Manhattan? Where did all the money come from? And no one has ever gotten to the bottom of that because no one has ever tried. And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying that. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that. I've spent my entire life pretty much in Washington, where I knew and loved a number of people, including one very close person who worked at CIA. That has never prohibited me from saying, I think the CIA has done some horrible things, murdered a bunch of people, participated in the murder of a sitting U.S. president. It's got a whole trail of crimes. That doesn't make me a disloyal American. It doesn't make me anti-American in any sense. I was born here. My family's been here for hundreds of years. I love this country. That's why I live here. So criticizing the behavior of a government agency does not make you a hater. It makes you a free person. It makes you a citizen. You're allowed to do that because you're not a slave. You're a citizen. And you have a right to expect that your government will not act against your interests, and you have a right to demand that foreign governments not be allowed to act against your interest. That's not creepy. It shouldn't be forbidden. And yet all of us have trained ourselves to believe that you can't say that somehow, that that's like too naughty and forbidden. And the effect of making that off limits has been to create a lot of resentment, and I'll say it, hate online, where people feel like they can't just say, like, what the hell is this? You have the former Israeli prime minister living in your house. You have had all this contact with the foreign government. Were you working on behalf of Mossad? Were you running a blackmail operation on behalf of foreign government? By the way, every single person in Washington, D.C. thinks that. I've never met anyone who doesn't think that. I don't know any of them that hate Israel, but no one feels they can say that. Why? And I think the longer that we play along with it, the more subterranean and creepy and hateful the conversation actually becomes. So I think it's better just to say it right out loud. Did this happen? And of course, that question has been asked to the government of Israel, and their answer is, we're not going to tell you. And I think our answer should be, no. As long as we're sending you money, if you were committing crimes on our soil, we have an absolute right to know, did you do this or not? And yet everybody has been so brainwashed into thinking that's somehow an expression of hate or bigotry, when it's not. It's a baseline question that every U.S. citizen has a right to an answer on. What the hell was this? And by the way, if it turns out that it was nothing